Hey guys, Matthew, and welcome to the 5th episode of my boss killing series. So today we're actually going to be looking at our first invitation and an introduction to the Uncharted Realm. So let's go ahead and start off with that. So this button here at the middle of your atlas is the Uncharted Realms. If you haven't unlocked it, it's because you haven't done any of the invitations. Once you've done any of the invitations, or maybe even potentially the 10 boss fights, I don't quite remember, this button should appear. So in my opinion, the easiest of all the invitations is going to be the formed, but you do have 5 different invitations which are going to give you 2 points each for the Uncharted Realms, and Maven herself is also going to give you 2 points for a total of 12 points. So these 12 points, there's a lot of things you can do in the Uncharted Realms. There's some really cool stuff. For example, Close Allies gives you a bunch of master missions if you're more of a casual player. Because you get 1 free for each of the master every day, plus 10% chance to get any Atlas missions for the people who like to speedrun maps for master missions. There is the Sextant, 1 additional use. This is massive for people who are using very rare Sextant modifiers such as Nemesis 3, right? Nemesis monsters drop 3 additional basic currency items, because this is going to give you 4 maps worth instead of 3, which is huge. There's some boss killing nodes over here which give you a ton of influence items, very, very strong at the start of League, where influenced bases are super expensive. Of course, Gaze into the Abyss for 10% additional chance for Watcher's Eyes, plus Shaper drops 3 additional Shaper items. Really, really nice. this is super good, even at this point in the League. There's the 25% chance when completing a map influenced by Conqueror to gain double the progress. So for example, what that means is, as you can see here, I have 3 additional maps in order to spawn my Redeemer. Well, if I have a 25% chance when doing any of these maps to actually complete 2 of these, right? Double maps, which is really, really nice. Because that basically means that you're going to be able to, farm Cyrus much faster. The additional awakening level means more awakened gems from the Conqueror and from Cyrus himself as well. There's the 50% increased chance for awakened gem on Thaumaturgical Awakening as well. On the left side here, there's Mastery of the Atlas, which is basically a lot more Zana missions, which is pretty okay, but it's mostly for paths not taken, where basically Zana in areas of additional maps that can appear, and doubles the base number of map options. So this is really good when you're trying to farm something like Cortex, or for example, last League was all about harvest farming, so people would take paths not taken and look for harvest from Zana herself. Now this has changed a little bit now. There's Echoes of War, where 30 additional packs of Shaper and Elder monsters. This is not super great, but it's a little bit of extra monsters on your map. And then there's the pretty cool stuff up here as well. You have Secret of the Stone for 25% effective Watchstone modifiers. This is really nice, but the thing is, this game does not work in decimals. So if you have, let's say, I don't know, 1%, this is going to take your 1% to 1.25, but this is going to round it down to 1%. Even if you had 4 of those, technically you would think that, 4% gets multiplied by 1.25, which then becomes 5%, but that's not how it works. It's basically per Watchstone modifier itself, and then it's going to be added within each other. So the multiplication happens beforehand. The one way to see that that's actually the case is that whenever you put a map in your atlas, you'll actually see a bunch of information on the right hand side here, which are all the things that are affecting your map, such as Watchstones, such as Sextants and all that. And that's how you know that essentially the multiplication applies before the addition of multiple Watchstones stacking together, which is kind of annoying, but it's still a very, very useful node. So for example, one of the best way to use this is for Ritual here. You have a Ritual in Hayward Hamlet. You have one of the Watchstones that give you 4 rituals. Well, this is going to make it 5, which is really sick. All right, so now we have also Neural Pathways, 1% chance to drop synthesis maps in T11. So when you're speed farming maps, this is a great way to get Cortex maps alongside the other memory maps, which is pretty all right. You have Synthetic Source when farming the unique bosses in synthesis maps. So for example, if you're farming the invitation, that is the 3rd one, right, with all the memories, this is a great way to get a bunch of really cool items, because all the synthesized unique drops are going to have 3 synthesis implicit modifiers. So for example, the rings, right, or the gloves and all that, they're always going to have 3 synthesized implicits, which basically increase your odds by a lot of getting a good one. And then you also have Vivid Memories, where monsters have 1% chance to drop synthesized items, which is, I mean, not crazy, because the odds of getting a good implicit is very, very low. But if you're outright just farming a ton of these memory maps, it's actually a pretty good way to make some nice little currency if you get lucky. And if not, then it's not a big deal because you're obviously caring a lot more about synthetic source than anything else. Okay, so that's basically a rundown on the Uncharted Realms. Now let's talk about the actual way to unlock this. So as I mentioned, you need to do one of the invitations in order to unlock this button, right? It's not going to show up. And that's a little bit annoying because the thing is, if you're actually running these Guardian maps, right, or any of the Shaper Guardian maps, or any of the maps in the actual list for the invitations, you actually will not know which map you've actually completed. So you need to keep track yourself until you actually do one of the invitations, and then this thing appears, and then at that point, you know, you'll be able to very easily see what you have and what you need. Okay, so let's talk about the formed itself. Now, the formed invitation is a drop that is random. Typically going to be dropping from, it can drop technically from any of the bosses below, but mostly going to be dropping from the Shaper Guardians. Typically, the content that you're interacting with is more likely to drop the right invitation that you are trying to do. So in this case, it is the formed. Okay. In order to be able to drop the formed, however, you actually need to be witnessing, you need Maven to be witnessing your maps. So if my Maven little button here is not activated when I'm doing my boss invitations, or sorry, my boss skills, right, my Shaper Guardians, it is impossible for me to drop an actual formed. But I mean, it's also impossible because it's not going to be witnessing the bosses, which means I wouldn't be able to do the formed, which all makes sense, right? So one thing to note about the formed that I mentioned in other videos is that it has a 20% chance to drop, but there's only 4 guardians, which means that technically it's impossible to self-sustain. That being said, there's a really cool beast in this game called the Phenomenal Plagued Arachnid, which allows you to split a rare item into 2, and it actually does work for invitations. Now, I don't know if this is going to stay the case going forward, but at the very moment, it is actually working. So what that means is that technically every 2 rotations, every 8 maps, you should be getting at least 1 invitation, and you're going to need 2 of them. So you can split that invitation that you get. And if you get an additional one, you can actually sell it for even more profit, which is really, really cool. You really need to remember about Phenomenal Plagued Arachnid. They're a great way to make a lot of additional currency when farming Guardian maps. Okay, so let's go ahead and jump into the formed itself, and let's have a showcase. Before I do this, however, I want to talk very quickly about the map mods that I want to be avoiding here. I'm going to be running it white, but one thing that you can do actually, if your character is fairly weak, let's say in the league start scenario, you know, 5 link and all that stuff, you can actually run it blue, because at least if you run it blue, there's a lot of modifiers that are not really going to affect your character whatsoever, and that are going to make it, you know, be making it much more, I guess you could say, rewarding, because it's going to add quantity. So for example, here we have Frenzy Charge on hit, which if you don't get hit, that means that technically it doesn't really do anything. But monsters deal extra physical as lightning. That means that I'm going to be getting shocked. That means that I'm going to be taking a lot more damage, because you know, all the physical damage is also going to be taken as lightning on top. So it's not quite double the damage, because of course you have resistances, which are going to be nullifying a lot of that damage, but it still means you're going to be taking a lot more damage. But there's a lot of modifiers. This, for example, monsters have a 20% chance to cause elemental ailments. This is pretty much nothing for me, right? But it does add quantity, so I'm going to augment this and see what I get. Players are cursed with vulnerability. Well, I'm already going to curse myself a bunch, so that's okay, because you know, I'm cursing myself, and I'm going to nullify these curses with a warding flask. So I'm actually all right with this. So we're going to be running this. Okay. Now that we know what we're going to be doing here, seems okay, I swapped my weapons. I was wondering what was going on here. All right, let me go ahead and do that. Okay, so this is perfectly fine, and you see it adds an extra 26% quantity, which is going to apply to both the Maven Writs, right? The Maven Splinters, the Crescent Splinters that are going to be dropping, but also Watchstones, right? More Watchstones are going to be dropping, more maps are going to be dropping, you know, more, you know, Shaper Fragments are going to be dropping, etc., etc. So you want to be running these as juicy as possible, as much quantity as possible, but then again, you want to stay in a region where you can actually afford to be able to do it without your character just falling flat on its face and failing, because every time you fail one of these, you have to go back and do the 4 bosses before you can attempt it again. Okay, so let's go ahead and real quickly, the map mods that I want to avoid. AoE, really, really bad. It's going to make, you know, what's his face? Minotaur, much harder to deal with. Phoenix, much harder to deal with. So AoE is a no-go for me. Another thing that I really don't like here is +2 projectile. That's going to make it so Hydra is going to be filling up the screen with a lot of stuff. Like, for example, her fork arrows going to be all over the place. Not something I want to deal with. On top of the fact that the little cannons that are spawned are also going to be, you know, putting a lot of stuff on my screen that I don't want to be seeing, that I don't want to be dealing with. Those are the two main ones that I really don't want to be dealing with. And the last one would be, of course, attacking cast speed. Attacking cast speed is really, really bad. It makes basically all the bosses really hard to deal with. And when you think about all 4 of them at once, it's going to mean a much, much harder time actually, you know, dodging things, mechanics and attacks that are coming my way. So yeah, AoE, +2 proj, attack, and cast speed. Those are the 3 that I absolutely don't want to be doing. Then after that, it really comes down to your character. Can your character handle getting hit? If so, maybe you don't mind having certain things like physical as extra X, you know, element. Maybe you don't care about having a crit chance and crit multi on the map, stuff like that. If your character has a ton of damage, right, then and you're squishy, maybe you don't want any of those modifiers that are going to make it harder for you, but actually you don't care about having, for example, additional life on the bosses because you have a ton of damage anyways, right? So it really comes down to your character afterwards, but initially that's the 3 that I really don't want to deal with, +2 proj, AoE, and attack and cast speed. So one thing to know here is that I can actually see the bosses before I spawn them. So as I can see, this is Phoenix, this is Chimera, then we have Minotaur, and finally Hydra. The worst possible combination, in my opinion, is Minotaur and Hydra at the start. That makes it really, really hard to actually deal with everything that's on the screen. That being said, so initially I'm going to have 2 bosses spawn, and then after I think 20 seconds, the other 2 are going to spawn. So my goal is to kill the first 2, or at least one of them within the first 20 seconds, because if I'm not able to kill any of these bosses in the first 20 seconds, and I get to fight all 4 at once, it's going to become very, very difficult. So if you have you know, some flasks that you can swap in for additional damage and whatnot, this is a great way to do so. So what I'm actually going to do here, what I completely forgot, is I'm going to drop my Quicksilver and I'm going to use an Adziri's Promise. This is going to give me just that much more damage, right? That little extra edge of damage, which I'm going to be trying to take advantage of. There's no reason for me to get move speed here. It's a very small arena. Okay, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to spawn it. I'm going to go to the first one that I see. I'm going to debuff it and try to blow it up, and then I'll do the same thing. One thing to note, if you're playing a build that has some debuffs here, you really want to be putting your debuff. Try to focus on dealing damage more so than surviving, because this is softcore. Well, at least if you're in softcore. And if you get to the point where you have all these 4 bosses at once, it becomes it becomes extremely hard to deal with. So dealing damage, especially for the first 2 bosses, is going to be very, very important. All right, let's get right in. So we have Chimera here. Gonna go ahead, Phoenix here. Gonna go ahead and debuff him. Make sure that I don't die. I think the other one that I got was Minotaur. So Minotaur is definitely one that can do a lot of damage if I'm not careful. Okay, so we actually killed one of them first. We're going to go ahead and debuff the Minotaur now. We also have Chimera to deal with. So fortunately, Chimera is not too hard to deal with. You basically just want to make sure that you don't get hit by the little flicker strikes and all that good stuff. Minotaur is definitely a lot more annoying, but it does seem like Minotaur, is he dead? I think Minotaur is actually dead. So we're going to go ahead and take care of this guy now, and then we're going to go ahead and also deal with Hydra, which is probably the worst of all of them, I would say. The fork arrows just make the fight so much harder to deal with. There's so much stuff. There's so much just visual noise on your screen. Look at that. Isn't that crazy? There's just so many different things to deal with to try not to get hit by. So Minotaur is actually not dead. So I really want to focus on getting at least one of these bosses down before I die, because I'm feeling like I'm probably going to be dying here. There you go. I ran out of flash charges. I don't really have anywhere to go. The arena is got tons of stuff to deal with on it. So I'm definitely going to be trying to deal as much damage as possible now. As I've got my flask reset, right? So we're definitely going to be debuffing these bosses, trying to deal with this as much as possible. Putting down our debuffs, and there we have it. So we did die once, but it wasn't too bad. We got 4 crescent splinters. We got only 1 watchstone. Now this was only, I believe, 20 something percent, right? 26%, so not a very juicy invitation, but the fact that we can do it, you know, fairly easily, 1 death on a 5 link with extremely budget gear, it just goes to show that you really don't need a whole lot so long as you kind of know what's going on. In terms of the strategy for me when it comes to these invitations, it's really just about running in a circle. I try to run in a circle, and when I see some sort of blink to me, some sort of burrow from, for example, Minotaur, some sort of fork arrow by Hydra, I'm just going to flame dash out of it and basically try to stay away as much as possible. I don't really mind if I can't really see what's going on the other side of the screen, because as long as I know that there's nothing close to me that can kill me, as long as I see the incoming mechanics, I could just flame dash out of them. And sometimes I'll die. Sure, that's just the nature of a softcore build, which has very little damage and very little survivability. But as long as I can do it, and that is very consistent, 100% success rate really with a build like this, so long as I'm not omega juicing them, that is good for me. Now, of course, once I actually get upgrades on my build, I get better wands, because my wands are absolutely horrible. I get a 6 link, I start actually getting some levels. I'm only level 88 on this character, not even level 90 here. I get some levels, I get some better jewels, I get some better clusters. Once I get some upgrades, better gloves, better everything really, then I can actually start to omega juice these, get them to 100% quantity, and really start to juice them up really, really high. But there's no need to be able to do this initially, right? Initially, the stuff that I just dropped here, a platinum turns and watchstone, as well as 4 crescent splinters in a league start scenario, that's a lot of currency that I wouldn't have if I wasn't able to do it. 2 unmaking orbs, right? That's probably about 50 C worth of currency that I wouldn't have if I wasn't able to do it. On top of that, there's also the bases that drop. Sometimes you'll get some crazy good bases. They are item level 85. Everything that drops in this invitation is 85, which means that if you get something like a crystal belt, right, or a Val Regalia, right? There's a lot of really good bases, especially in a league start scenario. A lot of these bases are very expensive. So this ring, for example, probably about 15-20 C in a league start scenario. So we've made nearly 100 chaos in a league start scenario anyways, from just being able to do it. My build is not even worth 100 chaos, right? So think about, just do that a few times, and all of a sudden you're looking at, a 6 link, you're looking at massive upgrades, and then you can start really juicing them up and making a lot more currency. So anyways, that's going to be it for the video. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this guide on the Formed, which was the first one of the invitations. In the next video, we're basically going to be going over Shaper, which is the other boss linked to these fragments, and then we're going to keep going on with the other stuff afterwards. Before I go though, as always, I want to say a massive thank you to my supporters: Joseph, Atticus, Don, Brandon, Fruitfly, Reese, Panda, Essential Bard, Adorant, welcome back, Neroth, Jacob, Thomas, Nike, The Great Master, Raymond, Alex, Emil, Tim, Grimoire, Lost with a Map, Flame Scorpion, Nathaniel, Richard, Johnny, Scott, Ronald, Willie D, Kevin, Munkus, Mercury, Bizen, Axel, and of course anybody else who wishes to remain anonymous, anybody else who's supporting me in the past. Hopefully you guys enjoyed, and I'll catch you guys in the next guide. Peace.